Okay, moving on to the next part here. Something I really wanted to talk about with Ryan. Let's put this up there, please, on the screen. New report from the Wall Street Journal with a lot of interesting little tidbits. Headline: Oregon decriminalized hard drugs. It isn't working. Majority of voters now want to undo a pioneering change as public drug use has become rampant. So they say nearly 3 years ago into the experiment, the proponents hoped would spark nationwide relaxation of drug laws. Many in Oregon have now turned against decriminalization, known as Measure 110, which passed at that time with 58% support. People are sprawled out on sidewalks using fentanyl with no fear of consequence, have become a common sight in cities such as Eugene and in Portland. Business owners and local leaders are upset. Liberal voters who hope decriminalization would lead to more people getting help. In reality, few drug users have taken advantage of a new state-funded rehabilitation program. Quote, change appears likely. A coalition of city leaders, police chiefs, district attorneys have called on the state legislature to recriminalize hard drugs. A measure to do so in works on the next year's ballot, and a new poll finds the majority of Oregonians support the idea. So, Ryan, you literally wrote the book on drugs, on drug legalization. You've been kind of a leader in the decriminalize movement and all of that for a long period of time. So what do you make then of what's happened in Oregon? Did they just not do it the right way? What do you think of the results of what's happened so far?
And so, so my book came out in 2009.
Yeah.
And it made, I think, several points that are quite relevant to this debate. One is that drug policy does not exist in a vacuum. That drug policy is kind of the last thing that matters for drug policy. What matters more for it is economic policy for the most part, but also, broadly speaking, the things that are shaping the world and shaping the culture shape what drugs, become kind of popular in a moment. In other words, Oregon's decriminalization law has probably less to do with fentanyl than the fact that China is pumping fentanyl into the United States. Your Oregon's law is going to move the numbers. Underneath it all is
it's a macro issue.
Are the bigger macro issues. The other point that I made in the book, and so as I was publishing the book, kind of the movement was kind of nascent, but it was the pendulum was swinging toward more liberal drug policies, and I warned that the history of drug policy in the United States is not a Martin Luther King type thing where it bends towards justice. It doesn't all move in one direction. It swings back and forth. You had moments in the 19th century, moments in the 20th century, where you had quite liberal drug policies, either nationally or in particular cities, and then things would get wildly out of control. And you can try to, kind of stitch just a racist drug war frame onto everything, but that doesn't answer the entire question. What you also get is just normal people who are like, this is a mess. And whether that's kind of cocaine or laudanum in the 19th century, leading to then, criminalization, or what you're seeing now, I warned that if it's not done both kind of responsibly and seriously, then you're going to get a lot of victories, but they're going to get reversed. And I think we're now at that place. And so decrim is kind of the worst of all worlds because it does nothing kind of for the economic problems that people are facing. It doesn't give people access to kind of clean drugs. You're still getting it from the street. The only difference is that if a cop says something to you, you get a little ticket and you don't go to jail. Right. So that's the only difference. But it still allows all of this public consumption, which the public hates.
Yes.
Alcohol is legal, but we don't allow people to just be passed out drunk all over the sidewalks.
Public intoxication is not really acceptable, or at least it shouldn't be acceptable.
Because we have a actually regulated system around this very addictive and dangerous drug, alcohol.
And even smoking, if you think about it. I mean, you can't just smoke anywhere in most of this country, at least at this point.
But if we just said, look, alcohol is illegal, but it's not criminal, so bootleggers can make it, people can drink it wherever they want and just get a little ticket. And the treatment won't work. That's the third point. Our treatment system is this ancient Alcoholics Anonymous system that only really works for certain people, insists on pure abstinence, pure sobriety, does not allow any medication-assisted treatment.
Like methadone. And,
it's certainly not methadone, but then Suboxone and some other more recent, less addictive medications that can help with opioids. We treat opioids just the same as we treat alcohol, and it's absurd and it's not working.
See, this is interesting though, because it kind of belies something that I've always insisted on. Is I read Michael Schellenberger's book, and it's the only book that's ever. I was not for drug legalization. I'm still think I'm complicated on it. That said, I was like, if I was ever for it, this is the way it would work. Which is, yeah, you can do drugs, but if you're getting high on a public bench, you're going to jail or you're going to rehab. Like, you have no choice. This middle ground where we're at right now, not as much in Washington, D.C. We still have some of a problem, but not even close to the zombies of San Francisco, to Los Angeles, and to Skid Row. Skid Row is honestly burned into my memory from 2022. I still have never seen anything like it. I've seen some of the worst slums in Mumbai, and I still think Skid Row was 10 times worse because it was just a complete, like, it was a war zone, it felt like, for the people who were there, and it was just very clear for so many of them that they had absolutely no hope. I've checked out, if you want to, interviews on the Soft White Underbelly channel, and then it only even more convinced me so that I'm like, to me, and this is actually a big disagreement with Crystal, I'm like, I don't think housing has to do with any of this. I'm like, none of this seems to me as a housing problem. This all just seems like these people are straight up, full-blown drug addicts. And the only way that you can really even begin to solve that problem is forcible rehabilitation or jail. And any of this public camping is deeply unsafe for them. They're just going to kill themselves. Already right now, the New York Times and others are reporting about the rise of so-called super meth, about how people are injecting all kinds of things. They're not only mixed with fentanyl, but flesh-rotting substances and others. It just lead to, it's just a one-way road to death. Like, let's be real. And it's not safe for them. It's not safe for a lot of the women. One report I read was just so horrible. Is a lot of these women, one of the reasons why, when they're addicted to fentanyl, is they're taking meth, is so they can stay up all night so that they don't get robbed or raped in the middle of the night in some of these encampments.
Yeah,
this is not
sexual
safe
assault,
for anybody.
Sexual assault in these camps
is rampant.
Absolutely rampant.
Right, and so
you don't want to condemn people to that.
Of course not. Yeah, it's like it's worse than prison almost in some cases. And so. Anyway, so what I've looked at here with the enforcement mechanism is they say, quote, some 6,000 tickets have now been issued for drug possession since decriminalization went into effect in 2021, but just 92 people have called and completed their assessments needed to connect them to services. So voluntary services, it's clearly now, we've had real world experimentation here. It's not going to happen.
Because I think a lot of people know that there's nothing on the other end for them too, that those 92 people, they'll sign up for what's called kind of a 28-day wonder.
Yes.
Where you go to this treatment center for 28 days, you read the big book, you sit around in your folding chair, you work, you color, you write, and then 28 days later, you're kicked back out, and you probably have a long criminal record from the different nuisance stuff related to your addiction, and there's no moment where somebody can say, and this is what a lot of people who are homeless and living with addiction will say, that there's no moment, I can't say, you know what, I would like an apartment and a job right now. Okay, I'm ready for that. I have the will, I have the commitment, I'm gonna put this behind me. Even if you go through treatment, that just doesn't exist. This work for you. Now, obviously some people can get there, but overwhelmingly, people just don't see a way to get from here to there.
Opiate recidivism rates are so high. I mean, it depends on the drug, like heroin versus fentanyl and others. But even just based upon the people I've seen, interviews and anecdotes and others, for people who want to get clean and who have gone to multiple, long treatment centers, as you're saying, I mean, one of the dangers that I've actually had read a lot about was that in some cases, these 3-week or 4-week centers, it almost leads sometimes to worse overdoses.
Yes, because now your tolerance is down.
Their tolerance is down, and they end up taking the similar amount or chasing a certain high, and it leads to an overdose, which puts you obviously in a really perilous situation. It literally could die. One thing though, and this kind of, I don't even know what to make of this. So I wanted you to break it down for me. Let's put this please up on the screen. This is from from OPB, and they actually show that drug decriminalization in Oregon did not cause more overdose deaths. So what are we to make of this? Because as you said, yeah, they're still getting street drugs, but it didn't lead to more overdoses. Is this indicative that drug use just stayed the same that it didn't actually impact it, that the only real impact it appears to have had is more public drug use? What does an overdose rate and death actually mean for drug policy? Like, how are we supposed to look? Because people were pointing it to me as a victory. But the more I was reading about it, and this is from the NYU public health study of what's going on in Oregon, I was like, well, you could actually read this a couple of different ways for victory, or honestly just stasis for what's happened.
I mean, I would say that the more that you can take the criminal justice system out of drug policy, then the more you're bringing the public health system in. And while you're unlikely, like I said, to kind of eradicate the addiction crisis, because that's a much steeper hill to climb, and like we were just talking about, so many of these treatment centers are actually just kind of Medicaid scams that aren't serious about getting people sober. You can, however, keep people safer, because more people are going to be comfortable going to the hospital. More people are going to be comfortable calling an ambulance. More, you probably have more access to Narcan as a result, which is the kind of overdose antidote.
Right.
So I think that you could explain it. You could explain it that way, and also forcing people into treatment who don't want treatment, keeping them sober for 28 days and then throwing them back out on the street, like we just talked about, can increase overdoses and deaths.
Well, I mean, I think they should get a choice. It's like, listen, you can go to jail too. Like, you have an option. I believe that's how Portugal does it. So Portugal has legal drugs. They even have, safe injection sites and all of that. That said, if you are publicly intoxicated, strung out, committing street crime and all of that as a result of your addiction, you only have two choices, which is rehabilitation and or jail. But they're not going to tolerate, some of the stuff that we see on the streets of California.
That stick does give people an incentive. That's also not ideal. If you can couple that with real training and education, and also then economic opportunities on the other side, then people have an actual choice. Like, here is a good life I could have that's an alternative. Right now, for most people, they don't realistically see that possibility.
What non-AA rehabs have you seen be successful? And for anybody out there
they call it
struggling with addiction.
buprenorphine. You could go back to read this piece I edited by Jason Cherkis at the Huffington Post called "Dying to Be Free." Just Google that, and it explains a lot of what we're talking about here. But Suboxone and buprenorphine are what they call medication-assisted treatment. Bup is the kind of generic name for it, and people say, well, it gives you kind of like a coffee buzz, whereas methadone is more of a synthetic opioid that can create real, dependence. But also, dependence is not that bad. Like, you can, if you have diabetes, you're dependent on
I'm dependent on coffee.
treatment. You're dependent on coffee.
Right.
Like, the question is it ruining your quality of life, and is it damaging your relationships, and is it making it impossible for you to do things safely? And Suboxone Bup does not do that. And so it's mostly a tab form. You get it prescribed, and it both, if you relapse, it counteracts an overdose, and it also kind of undermines the kind of craving that people have. But this is up against fentanyl, which is kind of a new, it's a kind of new fearsome kind of level of potency that's out there. So this was designed for heroin and other opioids. So we're in a difficult spot. But that's, I would, if you have people who are in those circumstances, check out medication-assisted treatment.
Right. Well, there you go. All right. So anybody struggling, go ahead and look into that.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.